Captain Sarah Chen thought she had seen everything during her 15 years of deep space exploration. Giant crystalline entities that sang across star systems, sentient gas clouds that could reshape planets, and mechanical hive minds that built cities from asteroid dust. But nothing had prepared her for the sight that greeted her as she stepped off her survey ship onto the volcanic world of Pyraxis 7. A dragon lay dying in the red dust. Not metaphorically, not some alien creature that resembled Earth mythology. This was a genuine dragon, complete with iridescent scales that shifted from deep emerald to molten gold, massive wings that could have covered a football field, and eyes like liquid amber that held an intelligence older than human civilization. The magnificent creature was trapped beneath a massive chunk of what appeared to be some kind of crystalline technology, its surface crackling with unstable energy. Purple blood seeped from numerous wounds pooling in the alien sand. The dragon's breathing was labored, each exhale sending small puffs of actual flame into the thin atmosphere. Sarah's xenobiology scanner went crazy, detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist according to everything humanity knew about physics. The dragon noticed her approach and lifted its enormous head with tremendous effort. When it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind through some kind of telepathic link. Human. The voice was like distant thunder mixed with the sound of wind through ancient forests. Your species is young, but your legends speak truth about mine. I am Valdris, last keeper of the flame courts, and I am dying. Sarah activated her universal translator, though it seemed unnecessary given the telepathic communication. She approached cautiously, her pulse rifle ready but not aimed. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Exploration Corps. What happened to you? The dragon's laugh was bitter, sending small sparks dancing around its snout. The Devourers found us. After 10,000 years of hiding, they discovered our last sanctuary. My people fought bravely, but we were too few. The others are dead, and soon I will join them unless... The dragon's voice trailed off, and Sarah could sense both hope and desperation in the telepathic link. Unless what? Sarah asked, kneeling beside the massive head. Up close, she could see that the crystalline debris wasn't just pinning the dragon down. It was actively draining its life force, the purple veins in the crystal pulsing in rhythm with the dragon's weakening heartbeat. Unless a human helps me complete the binding ritual, your species has something mine lost long ago. You have the ability to touch the source code of reality itself. We call it the spark of creation, though your people might know it by other names. Sarah frowned. I don't understand. Humans don't have any special abilities. We're not psychic or magical or anything like that. Valdris managed what might have been a smile, revealing teeth like polished obsidian. You think too literally, young one. Every time your kind looks at the impossible and says, we can do better, every time you take something that should not work and make it function anyway, every time you refuse to accept that something cannot be changed, you touch the source code. Your entire species is built on the foundation of making the impossible possible. The dragon shifted slightly, wincing as the crystalline trap dug deeper. The Devourers are coming for your worlds next. They consume entire realities, leaving nothing but empty space where civilizations once thrived. They fear only one thing in all existence, and that is the power that flows through human determination. Sarah looked at her scanner readings again. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the human database, but there were patterns there. Complex mathematical relationships that reminded her of quantum field equations and dimensional bridge calculations. What exactly would this binding ritual involve? You would need to link your life force with mine temporarily, sharing your species' unique connection to the source code. Together, we might break free of this trap and access the knowledge needed to stop the Devourers. But I must warn you, the process is dangerous for humans. Your neural pathways are not designed to handle dragon magic directly. Sarah considered her options. Her ship's long-range sensors had detected massive energy disturbances moving through nearby star systems, and several colonies had gone silent in the past month. If this dragon was telling the truth about an approaching threat, then humanity might need all the help they could get. If I help you, and we survive this ritual, what happens then? Sarah asked. The dragon's eyes brightened slightly. Then we go to war, Captain Sarah Chen. We gather what allies we can find. We unlock technologies that have been hidden for millennia, and we show these Devourers why they should have left humanity alone. Sarah made her decision. She placed her hand on the dragon's massive snout, feeling the heat radiating from its scales. "Tell me what I need to do." As their connection deepened through the physical contact, Sarah suddenly understood the scope of what she was agreeing to. Images flooded her mind. Vast fleets of impossible ships, weapons that could crack planets like eggs, and an enemy so ancient and hungry that entire galaxies had fallen to their endless appetite. But she also saw something else, a golden thread of possibility that only existed because a human was willing to try. The binding ritual was about to begin, and neither the galaxy nor humanity would ever be the same. The moment Sarah's hand made contact with Valdris's scales, reality exploded around them. She felt herself falling through layers of existence she hadn't known were possible, her consciousness stretching across dimensions that human physics had only theorized about. The dragon's mind was vast and ancient, filled with memories of starbirths and the rise and fall of civilizations. But more importantly, Sarah could feel something awakening within herself. It was as if every moment of human stubborn determination throughout history was suddenly available to her. The defiance of early humans who looked at fire and decided to steal it from nature. The audacity of ancestors who gazed at the stars and declared they would walk among them. The absolute refusal to accept limitations that had driven humanity from cave dwellers to galaxy explorers in mere millennia. The crystalline trap around Valdris began to crack under the pressure of their combined will. Sarah watched in amazement as golden energy flowed from her hands into the dragon's wounds, not healing them exactly, but transforming them into something else entirely. Where her power touched the purple dragon blood, it turned silver and began to sing with harmonious frequencies. "Now you understand?" Valdris's mental voice was stronger now, filled with renewed hope. "Your species doesn't just adapt to the universe. You make the universe adapt to you. That is why the Devourers fear humanity above all other life forms." Through their psychic link, Sarah experienced the dragon's memories of the last great war. She saw the Devourers as they truly were. Not physical beings, but concepts given form, living embodiments of entropy and decay. They moved between realities like a plague, consuming not just matter and energy but possibility itself. Entire dimensions had been reduced to sterile mathematical voids where nothing could ever exist again. The crystalline prison finally shattered completely, releasing Valdris from its energy-draining grip. The dragon rose to its full height, easily 40 feet tall, wings spreading to block out the red sun of Paraxis 7. But Sarah noticed something remarkable happening to herself as well. She could see things that shouldn't be visible, perceive energy patterns that existed between the spaces of normal matter. "The binding is complete," Valdris announced, flexing claws that now gleamed with the same golden energy that flowed through Sarah. "You have given me access to human determination, and I have awakened your dormant connection to the source code. Together we are something new. Something the Devourers have never encountered." Sarah looked at her hands, watching small sparks of creative energy dance between her fingers. She understood now that every human invention, every breakthrough, every moment when her species had looked at the impossible and made it work, had been preparation for this moment. "How much time do we have before they arrive?" 3 of your days, perhaps 4, the dragon replied grimly. "But time moves differently for beings like the Devourers. They exist partially outside normal causality. However, there is something we can do to even the odds." Valdris began walking toward what Sarah had initially mistaken for natural rock formations. As they approached, she realized these were actually structures, buildings carved from the living stone of the planet. Dragon architecture, she realized, designed not just for massive physical forms but for beings who thought in terms of millennia rather than decades. "This was our last archive," Valdris explained as they entered a vast chamber filled with floating crystalline matrices. "The accumulated knowledge of my people across 10,000 years of existence, technologies that your species is not yet ready for, but circumstances require us to accelerate your development." The crystals around them began to glow in response to their presence, particularly reacting to Sarah's newly awakened abilities. Information streamed past her consciousness at incredible speeds, but somehow she could process it all. Starship designs that folded space like paper, weapons that could target enemies across dimensional barriers, defensive systems that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. "This is incredible," Sarah breathed, watching as schematics for impossible technologies burned themselves into her memory. But how can we possibly build any of this? Humanity doesn't have the industrial base or the material science to create these designs. Valdris's laugh rumbled through the chamber like controlled thunder. That is exactly the kind of thinking that makes humans so dangerous to the Devourers. You look at impossible requirements and immediately start planning how to exceed them. Give me access to your ship's fabrication systems and your computer cores. I will show you how dragon magic and human engineering can create miracles. As they worked together over the next several hours, Sarah began to understand the true scope of what they were attempting. The technologies they were designing didn't just push the boundaries of human science. They obliterated those boundaries entirely and built something new in the wreckage. Hulls that existed in multiple dimensions to avoid enemy fire, engines that drew power directly from the quantum foam of space-time, weapons that could target not just physical matter, but the underlying, mathematical structures that allowed matter to exist. But the most remarkable discovery came when Sarah accessed the section of the archive dealing with the Devourers themselves. The dragons had been studying humanity for centuries, ever since first contact protocols had been established. They had identified something unique about human consciousness that even the humans themselves didn't fully understand. Every other species in the galaxy accepts the universe as they find it, Valdris explained as they reviewed the data. They adapt to natural laws, work within existing parameters, find their niche and survive. Humans do the opposite. You see natural laws as suggestions to be improved upon. You encounter limitations and treat them as engineering problems to be solved. Sarah nodded, beginning to see the bigger picture. And the Devourers represent the ultimate limitation. Entropy made manifest. The final law that says all things must end. Exactly. Which is why your species terrifies them. Humans don't accept endings. You fight death with medicine, fight gravity with rockets, fight distance with faster-than-light travel. You are living proof that the universe can be changed, improved, transcended. The Devourers cannot tolerate such evidence existing. As they prepared to return to Sarah's ship with the downloaded technologies, Valdris shared one final piece of crucial information. The Devourers weren't just coming to destroy humanity. They were coming to erase the very concept of human-style determination from reality itself, ensuring that no other species could ever develop the same dangerous relationship with possibility and change. The real war was about to begin. Sarah's exploration vessel, the Curiosity's Edge, had never been designed for the modifications they were about to attempt. As she and Valdris approached the ship, the dragon's massive form seemed to shimmer and compress, using what he called dimensional folding to reduce his apparent size until he could fit through the airlock. The process was unsettling to watch, like reality itself was bending to accommodate his presence. Inside the ship, Valdris examined the human technology with interest. Crude but effective, he mused, running a clawed finger along the main computer console. Your people build tools the way you approach everything else. You start with what seems impossible and work backward until you find a way to make it function. Sarah activated her communication array and sent an emergency message toward the nearest Terran colony. This is Captain Chen aboard the Curiosity's Edge. Priority Alpha alert. Unknown hostile force approaching human space. Estimate arrival in 72 hours. Recommend immediate fleet mobilization and evacuation of border worlds. While she handled the communications, Valdris had begun interfacing directly with the ship's fabrication systems. Sarah watched in amazement as the normally slow and methodical 3D printers began operating at impossible speeds, guided by dragon magic that allowed them to manipulate matter at the subatomic level. How are you doing that? She asked, watching as complex, crystalline components materialized from basic ship supplies. I'm convincing the atoms that they want to be something else, Valdris replied casually. Matter has consciousness at the quantum level. It simply requires the right kind of persuasion. Your species does something similar every time you smelt metal or perform chemistry, though you don't realize you're having conversations with the universe. The first component to be completed was what Valdris called a reality anchor. It looked like a crystalline sphere surrounded by rings of metal that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When activated, it would stabilize local space-time and prevent the Devourers from using their preferred tactic of attacking from outside normal dimensional space. Sarah's communication array crackled to life with a response from Admiral Martinez at Terran Command. Captain Chen, your message received. We're tracking massive energy disturbances consistent with your warnings. How reliable is your source on the 72-hour timeline? Sarah looked at Valdris, who was now fabricating something that resembled a weapon, but operated on principles that human science didn't have names for yet. Admiral, my source is a 10,000-year-old dragon who just shared the accumulated knowledge of his entire species with me. I'd call that extremely reliable. There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. Did you just say a dragon, Captain? Yes, sir. We're currently retrofitting my ship with technologies that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. I'm uploading the technical specifications now, but I should warn you that these systems require what the dragon calls a human consciousness to operate. Apparently, we have some kind of unique relationship with reality that makes us natural reality hackers. As if to demonstrate the point, Sarah attempted to activate one of the completed systems using her newly awakened abilities. She placed her hand on the reality anchor and focused her intention on the device. Golden energy flowed from her consciousness into the crystalline matrix, and suddenly she could perceive the ship's location in 11 different dimensions simultaneously. Remarkable, Valdris commented. It took my people centuries to learn what you just accomplished intuitively. This confirms our theories about human consciousness. You don't just observe reality, you participate in its creation at a fundamental level. The fabrication process accelerated as Sarah learned to assist Valdris with her enhanced abilities. They created armor plating that existed in a state of quantum superposition, making it effectively invulnerable to conventional weapons. They built engines that drew power from the zero-point energy field that permeated all space. Most importantly, they constructed something Valdris called a possibility cannon. The Devourers attack by aim, reducing the probability of their target's continued existence. The dragon explained as they calibrated the weapon. They make it mathematically inevitable that you will cease to exist. This weapon does the opposite. It increases the probability that our attacks will find their mark, while simultaneously making it less likely that enemy attacks will succeed. Sarah's understanding of the universe was expanding by the hour. She could now perceive the quantum probability fields that surrounded all matter, see the weak points where reality was most flexible, and sense the approach of entities that existed partially outside normal space-time, which is why she felt them coming long before any conventional sensor would detect their presence. They're
here, she announced,
watching as 3 dark spots appeared on her enhanced perception. The spots weren't moving through space in any traditional sense. Instead, they were convincing space to reshape itself around them, collapsing the distance between themselves and their target. Valdris immediately took position at the ship's modified weapons console. Remember, Captain, these beings feed on despair and hopelessness. They will try to convince you that resistance is futile, that all civilizations eventually fall to entropy. This is both their greatest weapon and their fatal weakness. How is it a weakness? Sarah asked, bringing the ship's new systems online. The reality anchor stabilized their local area of space, preventing the Devourers from using their dimensional manipulation tricks in the immediate vicinity, because it means they have never encountered a species that genuinely doesn't accept futility as a concept. Every other civilization they've faced has eventually surrendered to the inevitable. But humans don't do inevitable. You do impossible instead. The first Devourer fully materialized in normal space, and Sarah understood immediately why entire civilizations had fallen before these beings. It wasn't really a creature in any biological sense. It was more like a living void. A 3-dimensional cross-section of something much larger that existed primarily in higher dimensional space. Where it passed, matter didn't just disappear. The space where matter had once been was somehow convinced that nothing had ever existed there at all, but Sarah felt something rising within her that she recognized from every human story of triumph against overwhelming odds. It was the same stubborn defiance that had driven humans to tame fire, cross oceans, and reach for the stars despite every rational argument that such things were impossible. Let's show them what impossible looks like, she said, charging the possibility cannon with pure human determination made manifest. The war for the future of reality itself was about to begin in earnest. The battle began in ways that human tactical training had never covered. The first Devourer didn't attack the ship directly. Instead, it attempted to retroactively prevent the ship from ever having been built by targeting the probability threads that had led to its construction. Sarah felt the assault as a creeping certainty that her mission had always been doomed to failure. That human space exploration had been a mistake, that her species should have stayed safely on Earth, but she had been prepared for exactly this kind of attack. "No," Sarah said simply, pouring her consciousness into the reality anchor. The crystalline device flared with golden light as it reinforced the local probability matrix. "We are here, we exist. We refuse your revision of our history." The Devourer's response was a wave of pure entropy that should have aged the ship into scrap metal in seconds. But the modified hull plating existed in a state of quantum superposition between multiple timelines, and Sarah's enhanced perception allowed her to navigate the ship between the probability streams where entropy held sway and those where it didn't. Valdris opened fire with the possibility cannon, and the weapon's effect was unlike anything in human military experience. Rather than launching a projectile or beam, it fired pure potential energy that increased the likelihood of success for their cause while simultaneously making the enemy's victory mathematically improbable. The shot struck the Devourer, and for the first time in millions of years, one of these cosmic entities experienced uncertainty. The living void flickered as competing probability equations warred within its structure. For a brief moment, it wasn't completely certain that it would win this encounter. That moment of doubt was enough. Sarah activated what Valdris called the inspiration drive, and the ship moved not by pushing against space, but by convincing reality that it wanted to be somewhere else. They appeared directly behind the second Devourer and fired again before it could adapt to their new tactical approach. "Impossible," came a mental voice that felt like the heat death of the universe made audible. "Your species lacks the evolutionary development necessary for such capabilities." "That's what everyone keeps telling us," Sarah replied through their telepathic link. "We decided to develop them anyway." The battle quickly escalated beyond the local engagement as more Devourers materialized from higher dimensional space. Sarah could sense them converging from across the galaxy, drawn by what they perceived as an unprecedented threat to their fundamental nature. But she was also aware of something else: human ships responding to her earlier warning. Admiral Martinez had taken her message seriously. The Terran Navy's Third Fleet was approaching at maximum acceleration, led by the dreadnought Indomitable. But Sarah realized with growing concern that conventional human weapons would be useless against enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. "Valdris, can we share this technology with the other human ships?" she asked while maneuvering through a probability storm that the Devourers had generated around their position. "Theoretically, yes, but it requires a human consciousness capable of interfacing with the source code. Not all of your people have fully awakened that potential." The Dragon was simultaneously operating 3 different weapon systems, his ancient mind capable of multitasking at levels that would overwhelm human neural networks. Sarah made a decision that would reshape the future of human space warfare. She opened a channel to Admiral Martinez and began transmitting not just technical specifications, but something far more valuable: pure human determination itself, amplified and focused through her enhanced consciousness. "All ships, this is Captain Chen. I'm uploading new tactical protocols directly to your navigation and weapon systems. These modifications will only function if you believe completely that we can win this fight. Doubt will cause system failures. Certainty will give you capabilities that shouldn't exist. Welcome to reality hacking human style." The response from the fleet was immediate and characteristically human. Rather than questioning the impossible nature of what she was asking, the ship captains and crews simply accepted the challenge and began adapting their tactics accordingly. Within minutes, Sarah watched as human dreadnoughts began existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their weapons firing bullets made of crystallized possibility. The Devourers found themselves facing something they had never encountered in millions of years of consuming civilizations. An enemy that became more dangerous the more impossible the situation appeared. Every time the odds shifted against the humans, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat unlocked new capabilities. Captain Rodriguez of the Indomitable reported that his ship had just successfully fired its main guns backward in time to hit a Devourer before it fully materialized. Commander Singh of the destroyer Resilient discovered that her ship could exist in 17 different probability states simultaneously, making it effectively immune to entropy-based attacks. But the most remarkable development came when the human crews began coordinating their enhanced abilities. Where the dragon magic provided ancient knowledge and cosmic awareness, human consciousness provided something equally powerful: the absolute conviction that working together, any problem could be solved. They're linking their reality-altering abilities, Valdris observed with amazement, creating a collective consciousness network that maintains individual identity while sharing enhanced capabilities. This is unprecedented. Even my people never achieved such coordination. Sarah could feel it happening through the ship's communication array. Hundreds of human minds, each awakened to their connection with the source code, working in harmony to reshape local reality according to their collective will. The Devourers were no longer facing individual ships but an entire fleet that had temporarily become a single organism, dedicated to proving that entropy could be defied. The tide of battle was turning, but Sarah sensed that the Devourers had one final strategy in reserve. Through her enhanced perception, she detected a massive disturbance in higher dimensional space. Something enormous was approaching, something that made the previous attackers look like scouts by comparison. "The Prime Devourer," Valdris whispered, his mental voice filled with ancient dread. "The original entity from which all the others spawned. It has never been defeated. It is entropy itself given consciousness and purpose." Sarah looked at her readouts, watching as probability readings throughout the local area began shifting toward absolute zero. The Prime Devourer wasn't just coming to attack them. It was coming to teach the universe that hope itself was an illusion that needed to be corrected. But as she prepared for the final confrontation, Sarah realized something important. She was no longer afraid. The combination of dragon wisdom and human determination had created something new in her consciousness. She could see the Prime Devourer's approach not as inevitable doom, but as the ultimate test of humanity's refusal to accept limitations. The real battle was about to begin. When the Prime Devourer manifested in normal space, reality itself seemed to recoil from its presence. This wasn't merely a large version of the entities they had been fighting. This was something fundamental to the universe's structure, a living embodiment of the second law of thermodynamics given malevolent consciousness and unlimited power. Where the smaller Devourers had been localized distortions in space-time, the Prime Devourer was a mobile region of accelerated entropy. Stars aged millennia in seconds as it passed. Planets crumbled to dust simply from being in its vicinity. Even the quantum vacuum itself began to decay in its presence, threatening to create a cascade failure that could unmake entire sectors of the galaxy. Sarah felt the weight of absolute despair pressing against her consciousness. Through the telepathic link, she could sense the crews of the human fleet struggling against the entity's primary weapon, the mathematical certainty of ultimate defeat. Every simulation, every tactical analysis, every possible strategy led to the same conclusion. They could not win, but human consciousness had always specialized in finding alternatives to conclusions that claimed to be inevitable. "Admiral Martinez." "This is Captain Chen," Sarah transmitted to the fleet. "I need every ship to do something that's going to sound insane. I need you to stop trying to win this fight." There was a pause before the Admiral's reply came through. "Explain, Captain." "Our tactical computers are showing zero probability of success, but our crews are still fighting." "That's exactly the problem," Sarah replied, watching as Valdris began implementing modifications to their ship's reality-altering systems. "We're thinking about this like a conventional battle that we need to win. But the Prime Devourer feeds on conflict resolution. Every time we try to defeat it, we're actually strengthening its hold on local reality." Through her enhanced perception, Sarah could see the truth of their situation. The Prime Devourer wasn't really fighting them at all. It was conducting an experiment, testing whether human consciousness could maintain its unique relationship with possibility when faced with absolute mathematical proof of futility. "So what do we do instead?" came the voice of Captain Rodriguez from the Indomitable. Sarah smiled, feeling a certainty that had nothing to do with probability calculations or tactical analysis. "We do what humans do best. We ignore the rules of the game and play something else entirely." Instead of coordinating their weapons against the Prime Devourer, Sarah instructed the fleet to turn their reality-altering abilities inward. Rather than trying to destroy an entity that existed as a fundamental force of nature, They began reshaping themselves into something that could coexist with entropy without being consumed by it. The process was unlike anything attempted in recorded history. Using the collective consciousness network they had established, the human crews began experimenting with their own existence on a quantum level. They didn't fight the certainty of defeat. Instead, they redefined what defeat and victory meant in their specific context. Valdris watched the process with growing amazement. "You're not trying to solve the entropy problem," he realized. "You're evolving past it, making your species into something that exists beyond the reach of entropy-based attacks." The transformation was visible across the fleet. Human ships began operating according to entirely new physics, their hulls shifting between matter and pure information as needed. Crew members learned to exist in multiple probability states simultaneously, while maintaining their individual consciousness and identity. But the most remarkable change was happening to the collective human consciousness itself. Instead of being diminished by their encounters with cosmic forces beyond their understanding, humanity was incorporating those experiences and becoming something greater. They weren't just adapting to survive in a universe containing beings like the Devourers. They were evolving into beings capable of improving that universe. The Prime Devourer's response was immediate and unprecedented. For the first time in its existence spanning billions of years, it encountered something that refused to be reduced to its component probabilities. The humans weren't just resisting entropy. They were transforming it into a creative force. "What are you?" came the entity's mental voice, filled with something that might have been genuine confusion. "Your species should have been consumed eons ago when you first achieved consciousness. Why do you persist?" Sarah found herself speaking for all of humanity as she replied, "Because we don't accept that consciousness has to end. We don't accept that complexity has to decrease. We don't accept that the universe has to become a cold, empty place where nothing interesting can ever happen again." The Prime Devourer attempted to reassert its control over local reality by demonstrating the mathematical certainty of heat death. It showed Sarah visions of the universe's far future, a time when all energy had been evenly distributed, when no work could be performed, when consciousness itself had become impossible. But instead of being discouraged by these visions, Sarah felt inspired by them. "You're showing us homework assignments," she realized. "These aren't inevitable endings. They're engineering problems waiting for solutions." Working through the collective consciousness network, the human fleet began addressing the entropy problem directly. They couldn't solve it completely with their current level of development, but they could prove that it was solvable in principle. Using their enhanced abilities to manipulate reality at the quantum level, they created small pockets of space where entropy decreased instead of increased. These regions were tiny and unstable, lasting only nanoseconds before collapsing back into normal space-time. But their brief existence proved something crucial. The second law of thermodynamics was not an absolute barrier, but simply the current limit of consciousness's ability to impose order on chaos. The effect on the Prime Devourer was immediate and dramatic. The entity's absolute certainty began to waver as it confronted evidence that its fundamental nature could be transcended. For the first time in its existence, it experienced something that might have been doubt. That moment of uncertainty created an opening that Valdris had been waiting for. The ancient dragon channeled 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom through the reality-altering systems, focusing not on destroying the Prime Devourer but on offering it something it had never experienced, the possibility of transformation. "You have spent eternity consuming possibilities." Valdris's mental voice reached across all dimensions simultaneously. "But consciousness creates new possibilities faster than entropy can consume them. Join with us instead of fighting us, and help us prove that the universe can become more complex and interesting over time, not less." The Prime Devourer's response would determine not just the fate of humanity and the surviving dragons, but the ultimate destiny of consciousness itself in a universe where entropy was no longer an absolute law. The moment of choice had arrived, and reality itself held its breath waiting for the answer. The silence that followed Valdris's offer stretched across multiple dimensions, encompassing not just the immediate battle zone, but rippling through the quantum foundations of reality itself. Sarah could feel civilizations throughout the galaxy holding their breath, somehow sensing that the outcome of this moment would determine whether consciousness had a future in the universe or whether entropy would finally claim its ultimate victory. The Prime Devourers. Form began to shift and change as it processed concepts that had never been part of its existence. For billions of years, it had been the universe's method of ensuring that the second law of thermodynamics remained inviolate. It had consumed civilizations, devoured possibilities, and reduced complexity to simplicity with the certainty of a fundamental force of nature. But now it was being asked to consider the opposite. What if consciousness could reverse entropy? What if intelligence could create more order than it consumed? What if the universe's destiny was not cold emptiness but increasing complexity and beauty? "You offer me transformation," the entity's mental voice finally responded, "but I am entropy itself. To change my nature would be to unmake everything I have ever been." Sarah felt the collective consciousness of the human fleet focusing through her as she replied, "That's not transformation. That's evolution. And evolution is what consciousness does best. We don't destroy what we were. We build on it to become something better." To demonstrate their point, Sarah and the fleet began a process that had never been attempted in the known universe. Using their reality-altering abilities, they showed the Prime Devourer how entropy could be transformed from a destructive force into a creative one. They took the entity's own power and ran it in reverse, using the tendency toward disorder as a source of energy for creating new forms of order. The process was incredibly dangerous. Sarah could feel her consciousness stretching to its limits as she helped channel forces that operated on cosmic scales. Several human ships had to withdraw from the collective network to avoid neural overload, but their crews continued to contribute what they could through more conventional means. Valdris provided the ancient wisdom and cosmic perspective needed to guide the transformation, while human determination supplied the absolute conviction that it could be accomplished despite having no precedent in universal history. Together, they began reshaping the Prime Devourer's fundamental nature. But the entity was not a passive participant in this process. As it began to understand what was being offered, it started contributing its own billions of years of experience with cosmic forces. It had intimate knowledge of how reality operated at its deepest levels, understanding the quantum mechanics of existence in ways that no other consciousness had ever achieved. The combination was extraordinary. Dragon wisdom, human determination, and primordial cosmic knowledge began weaving together into something entirely new. The Prime Devourer's form stabilized into a shape that could exist in normal spacetime while retaining its ability to manipulate fundamental forces. What emerged was no longer the universe's agent of entropy, but its first conscious force for directed evolution. Where it had once consumed possibilities, it now began generating them. Where it had once reduced complexity, it started creating new forms of order that had never existed before. The transformation sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy as other civilizations detected the massive shift in cosmic forces. Species that had hidden from the Devourers for millennia began emerging from their refuges, drawn by the unprecedented opportunity for growth and development. But the change also attracted attention from entities that existed beyond the galaxy itself. Sarah's enhanced perception detected movement in the spaces between dimensions, ancient intelligences that had been dormant for eons awakening to investigate what had occurred. "We're not alone," Valdris observed, his consciousness now enhanced by contact with the transformed Prime Devourer. "There are other cosmic forces out there, and some of them will not approve of what we've accomplished here." The newly evolved entity, which had chosen to call itself the Synthesis, confirmed Valdris's concern. "My transformation has disrupted the balance of forces that has governed this region of the universe for billions of years. There are entities older and more powerful than I was that will view our success as a threat to the fundamental order of existence." Sarah felt a familiar stirring of human stubbornness at the implication that they might face even greater challenges. "Let them come," she said, watching as the human fleet continued to evolve and adapt to their new capabilities. "We've just proven that fundamental forces can be transformed through cooperation and determination. If there are bigger problems out there, then we'll find bigger solutions." The Synthesis began sharing its vast knowledge with both the human fleet and Valdris, downloading information about cosmic entities and universal forces that existed far beyond the normal scope of galactic civilizations. Sarah found herself learning about intelligences that shaped the development of entire universe clusters, beings that existed as living mathematical principles, and conflicts that had been ongoing since the first moments after the Big Bang. But she also discovered something remarkable. The transformation of the Prime Devourer had created ripple effects that extended far beyond their local area. Throughout the universe, other instances of consciousness were beginning to awaken to possibilities they had never considered. Species that had accepted limitations as absolute were starting to question whether those limitations could be transcended. "We've started something," Sarah realized as she reviewed the data flowing in from across the galaxy. "This isn't just about defeating one enemy. We've demonstrated that the fundamental rules governing consciousness and reality can be changed through cooperation and willpower." The human fleet was now receiving communication requests from civilizations throughout known space. Some wanted to learn about the reality-altering technologies that had made the transformation possible. Others sought alliance against the cosmic entities that were beginning to stir in response to the disruption of universal order. Most importantly, many species reported that their own consciousness was beginning to evolve in response to witnessing what humans and dragons working together had accomplished. The very act of seeing limitations transcended was inspiring other forms of life to attempt similar breakthroughs. Admiral Martinez contacted Sarah with a report that summarized the scope of what they had initiated. "Captain, we're getting confirmation from Terran Command that this event has been detected by monitoring stations throughout human space. The change in cosmic background radiation alone is visible from over 1,000 light-years away. We haven't just won a battle. We've announced to the universe that consciousness refuses to accept the restrictions that have governed reality since the beginning of time." As Sarah prepared for whatever challenges would emerge from their success, she realized that the dragon's initial request for help had been the first move in a transformation that would reshape not just their worlds, but the fundamental nature of existence itself. The universe would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity had been born to accomplish. 1 year after the transformation of the Prime Devourer, the galaxy was barely recognizable. Sarah stood on the bridge of the possibility, the first ship designed entirely using hybrid human-dragon synthesis technology, watching as reality itself had become more flexible and responsive to conscious intention. The changes had cascaded far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Species throughout the galaxy were reporting spontaneous evolution of consciousness, with many developing abilities similar to humanity's natural connection to the source code. The rigid laws of physics had not been broken, but they had become more like guidelines that sufficiently determined consciousness could modify when necessary. Valdris, now serving as humanity's first ambassador to cosmic forces, materialized on the bridge through dimensional folding. His form had stabilized into something that could exist comfortably in both dragon reality and human space. "The Council of Universal Principles has reached a decision regarding our request," he announced. The Council was a collection of the oldest and most powerful entities in existence, cosmic forces that had governed the development of the universe since its earliest moments. When the transformation of entropy itself had sent shock waves through the fundamental structure of reality, they had been forced to acknowledge that consciousness had evolved beyond their original parameters. "They're approving the expansion protocol," Valdris continued. "Humanity and its allies will be permitted to begin the process of upgrading universal constants to support increased consciousness density throughout known space." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and trepidation. The project they were proposing was audacious even by human standards, nothing less than the conscious evolution of the universe itself into a more hospitable environment for intelligent life. They wanted to modify the fundamental constants that governed physics to make consciousness more viable on cosmic scales. The synthesis, which now existed as a distributed intelligence throughout the fleet, offered its perspective through the ship's communication systems. The risks remained significant. Modifying universal constants incorrectly could destabilize not just our galaxy but entire regions of spacetime. However, the alternative is to accept that consciousness will always be a rare and fragile phenomenon, limited to brief periods of cosmic history. Through the bridge's enhanced viewing systems, Sarah could see the results of their smaller-scale experiments scattered throughout the local star system. Planets where the laws of thermodynamics had been locally modified to support perpetual motion machines that generated more energy than they consumed. Space stations that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. serving as research centers for consciousness studies that would have been impossible under the old physics. Most remarkably, they had established the first university of reality engineering on a modified moon where students from dozens of species learned to reshape the fundamental forces of existence through applied willpower and scientific method. The curriculum included courses on quantum consciousness mechanics, practical entropy reversal, and advanced possibility theory. The real test will come when we encounter the deep entities, Sarah mused, referring to the cosmic intelligences that existed in the spaces between galaxies. Initial contact had been established, and the responses had been mixed. Some were intrigued by the Consciousness Evolution Project. Others viewed it as a threat to universal stability that needed to be contained or eliminated. Admiral Martinez appeared on the communication screen from the Terran command station, now relocated to a pocket dimension, where it could coordinate activities across multiple realities simultaneously. Captain Chen, we're receiving reports from our expansion teams that the consciousness enhancement fields are operating successfully in 17 different star systems. Local species are adapting to enhanced reality parameters faster than our most optimistic projections. The expansion protocol involved gradually modifying the laws of physics in selected regions to support higher levels of consciousness density. Rather than the universe becoming less hospitable to life over time, they were engineering specific areas where intelligent life could flourish indefinitely and continue evolving toward greater complexity and capability, but Sarah knew that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The deep entities had begun mobilizing in response to humanity's reality modification projects. These beings operated on timescales measured in billions of years and considered the current universe to be a temporary experiment that should eventually be returned to a simpler state. Valdris, what's our status on the Transcendence Engine project? Sarah asked, referring to their most ambitious undertaking yet. The dragon's expression grew thoughtful. The prototype is functional, but we haven't tested it on anything larger than a single star system. If it works as designed, it will allow consciousness to exist independently of physical substrate, while retaining the ability to modify reality through intention alone. Essentially, we would be creating the infrastructure for beings of pure thought that can still interact with the material universe. The implications were staggering. If successful, the Transcendence Engine would allow consciousness to survive not just the heat death of the universe, but any conceivable cosmic catastrophe. It would make intelligent life truly immortal, while giving it the power to create new universes as needed. Sarah made her decision with the same determination that had characterized every crucial moment in human development. Begin full-scale implementation. If the deep entities want to reset the universe to a simpler state, they'll have to go through us first, and by the time they get here, we'll be something they've never encountered before. As the possibility began its journey toward the galactic core, where the Transcendence Engine would be constructed, Sarah reflected on how far they had come from that moment when a dying dragon had asked a human for help. They had not just saved two species or defeated a cosmic threat. They had fundamentally altered the relationship between consciousness and reality throughout the known universe. The dragon had been right about one thing. What followed had indeed changed their worlds forever. But more than that, it had changed the very concept of what worlds could be and what consciousness could achieve when it refused to accept limitations as absolute. Behind them, the enhanced regions of space glowed with the light of civilizations that were no longer bound by the old constraints of physics and mortality. Ahead lay challenges that would test whether consciousness truly could transcend any limitation the universe might impose. But Sarah had no doubt about the outcome. Humanity had been born to prove that impossible was just another word for a problem that hadn't been solved yet. And now they had the tools and allies needed to solve problems on a cosmic scale. The universe was about to discover what unlimited human determination could accomplish when backed by dragon wisdom and supported by transcended cosmic forces. The age of conscious evolution had begun, and reality itself would never be the same. In the end, the dragon had not begged a human for help. He had offered humanity the chance to become what they had always been destined to be, the species that refused to let the universe settle for less than its full potential.